Who here thinks that maybe you could be doing a bit more to create a sustainable world? Raise your hand. All right, you can look around. It's a lot of us. It better be, because people who selected you to come here, they're watching. All right. I think this talk is a little bit of a self-critic as well. This is a beautiful picture I took of Lisbon when I came here on a plane, half full. So I think it's nice to start being a little bit maybe self-conscious about our own incoherences when we are working in this field. Now my speech, actually. Let me start. As youth worker or a supporter of youth work, you know that sustainability is important. After all, we want youth work to be around for years to come. But what does sustainability really mean? Most people think sustainability is environmentalism. But sustainability isn't just about conserving resources or preventing climate change. It's also about social justice and economic development. In other words, it's about creating a world that is fair and equitable for all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomic status. The United Nations defines sustainability as the meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Youth workers are at the front lines of making sure that our society is sustainable, because after all, we are working with the future generation. If we can teach young people about sustainability and get involved in making positive changes, we can create a more sustainable world for everyone. Now a confession. I didn't write these words. I was without a lot of inspiration. Actually, nobody wrote these words. I just subscribed an online service of artificial intelligence where you write a few words and it writes a whole text for you. It wrote this. I'm a bit suspicious about AI, so I tried to make it hard for the computer. I just wrote 3 words: sustainability, youth, work. It wrote this, and not just this, it wrote a full speech, which I'm not using, by the way. And then it wrote a second full speech, so I could have options. I think I was humiliated enough after the first one, and I think AI shouldn't be bragging about their capacities like that, but well. 5 seconds. And I think it was 5 seconds because my internet was slow that day. So make no mistake, AI can already write a better Erasmus project than you can. It can already write a better training session than I can. Although that's not a big achievement, so let's forget about that. So what this made me think is that, maybe I build a lot of skills in youth work that are not useful anymore. Maybe I'm about to expire. And this made me think about sustainability. So this talk is not about AI, but it is about how can we deal with this fast-changing world that we were talking about yesterday here on the stage. How can we deal with this? How can we re-engineer our role in youth work? I think that it's a lot about change. And I have another story. A few weeks back, this is a true story, I was on a plane, so again, not very sustainable of me, and I took the in-flight magazine, paper, and I put my indicating finger and my thumb together, and I tried to enlarge a picture that was particularly small. I stayed at it a few seconds, frustrated, because it was not working, until I stopped, and I was in horror of myself. This was not a 3-year-old that grew up with, interactive screens all over. I didn't have interactive screens for more than 30 years, and now my brain expects paper to work like that. So it got me thinking that, change is not happening in the world. It's not happening in technology. It's not happening in generation Z or Alpha. It's happening in me. I changed. My brain changed, and I think all of us did. And I think sometimes we like this change more than we like to admit. You know, we like to say things like, before Netflix, we watched movies. No, no, you didn't. You know, before internet, we read more books. Well, did you? Really? So I think we need to just accept that we are changing. And the sooner we accept that and we really look inwards, what I feel in my practice is that the sooner I start doing that, the sooner I start actually giving space for more sustainable practices, because I take agency of my change. Now, I think change in humans, I read, is some of the hardest things to do, change behavior. Would you agree with that? Changing a habit, stopping something, starting a new habit, it's really hard, because we are wired to habits, to have habits, to keep some kind of safety in the world. So what I read is very interesting, is that there was a study that showed that all the strategies for changing behavior that were based on fear were very inefficient. That the best strategies to change behavior, for example, for more sustainable practices, were based on positive emotions, like hope. And this is studied, there's data on this. But when I talk to our community, to the people that are here and the people I meet in other trainings and events like this, what I hear is a lot of fears. I hear fears like, am I ever going to stop this cycle of being underpaid and overworked? Or will I ever get the so talked about recognition? Or did we already lost the fight against extreme right? Or is peace actually over in Europe now? There's a lot of fears in our community, and I think rightfully, but it requires us to change a little bit those fears or to work through them and add something positive in that bucket in order to have a positive platform for change to actually take place. I think sometimes we need to just consider that maybe sustainability and sustainable projects is really not even enough anymore. So in agriculture, it's very common knowledge that if you have a depleted soil with no nutrients, you cannot farm it anymore, right? Doesn't matter if you use a sustainable practice, it doesn't work. What did you need to do? You need to regenerate it, to get it back with these nutrients so the nature can do its course. I think this is true for many other aspects of our lives and in youth work. I have an example. I work with elderly and with young people as well. And one day in a project, we were asking teenagers, what are the words that come to your mind when you think of elderly? Their answer, the words were disease, death, smelly, and disgusting. I was appalled by this. And I was appalled because it sounded like a bad name for a metal band. That's what I thought. But also because that is not my experience. And it showed me that in that community specifically, the bonds between these two generations were lost. Any project in that field that would try to sustain something wouldn't work. It's not there anymore. So these bonds needed to be regenerated. And I think in our youth work, we need to see our job a little bit like this. We need to regenerate a lot of things that have been lost. In us, for example. What have we lost already that needs to be rekindled? Maybe the courage to act, maybe our passion, maybe our capacity together with others. But also in our organizations. What have we lost along the way that maybe put us further from our mission? And of course, in our communities as well. By the way, I have a picture of the end of that project with teenagers and elderly, and it was quite nice. Talking about community, I think that there is something about community that is very, very important. I think community is what gets us going, right? And I think some of us is missing or are missing chronically the sense of community. I am. I live in Lisbon, and it's a city that has been very gentrified. And most of my friends have either immigrated or left the town because it's too touristic. It's a theme park. So I miss community there. But sometimes I also miss the international community of youth workers or trainers. It's good to come to these events and meet you all because it gives us a little bit of that sense of community, right? But to talk about sustainability is as much to talk about environment as it is to talk about human relations. These human connections that we build with others are absolutely essential for us to change together. So my thoughts about youth work and sustainability on this point is that we need to be able to create more community. This idea that the youth worker can be really creative and have a great idea for a project and then write it 3 hours before the deadline and get it approved, and that's a stamp that we're doing really well. And then we try to get participants on board, and maybe they come, and that's another stamp that we're doing really well. I think it's rooted on this idea of the hero, the activist that commits, or the youth worker that is really bright and creative. But I think this individual effort, it's always less efficient than sustained collective action. And what we need is sustained collective action. So how do we create that? I think it's about creating more community, creating more spaces for participation and dialogue, involving new stakeholders that normally we don't involve. Get the grandparents there. Get the store owners, get the ministers, get the criminals, get everybody on board. I was living in Madeira for a while with a community of digital nomads during the pandemic. And at that moment, it was very interesting because for the first time in many years, I was close to nature and I had neighbors. And it was the happiest I've ever been in the last years. Some neighbors were really good looking too, but besides that, I was really happy there. And I really realized I missed this connection. To have people that I can talk with, that I can meet on the street, that I have similar interests, that I can have shared visions of the world, that really nurtured me and made me really happy. One of the last things I want to say today about how to make youth work a bit more sustainable, it's about compassion. And compassion means literally to suffer together. Now, I'm Portuguese, so I know a thing or two about this. Because in Portugal, we have this national song called Fado. You've ever heard about it? And Fado is very sad. It's like crying and singing at the same time. And we like it like that. So we gather in these little cafes that are very dark, maybe smelly, and we suffer together. And we even dim the light so it can suffer a bit more. It's so bad that we even have restaurants where we go to eat and suffer together. It's true. But it's not this kind of compassion that I talk about. I like the idea of joyful, active compassion. Now, I'm a clown. I work with elderly, and I do visits to the elderly. And what I bring is this, is what we were talking yesterday about, this presence, joyful presence. And I see compassion in this sense. Compassion with ourselves and with others is what allows us to really live with uncomfortable emotions, uncomfortable moments. And I think when we are changing behavior, either our own behavior or the behavior of others, through education, we really need to be compassionate about those feelings, because change doesn't come naturally. It doesn't feel good all the time. We have to go against the grain of our brain and our bodies and our emotions sometimes. All right, so to finish up, I have another confession. I got lost with my ideas, and so I had to ask again for AI to help me. So here are the closing words from my friend, the internet. Word by word. We need to be the change we see in the world. He was not getting very creative here. But it goes better. As youth workers, we have a unique opportunity and responsibility to create sustainable change for future generations. We need to make sure that our projects are financially stable. We need to build strong relationships with key stakeholders and plan for the future so that our work can continue without us. It's not wrong, right? Yeah. And it finishes with a question that I agree a lot with. And it reminds me, or it's a good reminder that, all of us here, all of us that are alive today, except the people that already died during this presentation, I think all of us, we are on our way out. On the big picture, on the history of humanity, we are on our way out. And so the question that I and AI put for you today is, what are you doing in youth work to make sure that you're leaving a lasting impact? Thank you very much.